Well, last week, RFK Jr. put an end to all mRNA technology in America, except that he actually didn't. And Twitter e-girls got bored, decided to kick off World War III, and there were no survivors. Benjamin Netanyahu finally admitted what has been the plan all along, to take Gaza as Israeli territory again. And Nick Fuentes completely broke the internet Friday night with his second part of deep diving into Tucker Carlson, the neoconservative movement, and what's going on in America today.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
It's so sick that we can't talk about it.
Well, RFK Jr. came out last week and announced that he will be terminating funding for 22 mRNA vaccine development programs for flu, COVID, and other upper respiratory viruses. Let's watch.
At HHS, we have a division called the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA. Over the past few weeks, BARDA reviewed 22 mRNA vaccine development investments and began canceling them. Let me explain why. mRNA vaccines don't perform well against viruses that infect the upper respiratory tract. Millions of people, maybe even you or someone you know, caught the Omicron variant despite being vaccinated. That's because a single mutation can make mRNA vaccines ineffective. mRNA technology poses more risks than benefits for these respiratory viruses. To replace the troubled mRNA programs, we're prioritizing the development of safer, broader vaccine strategies, like whole virus vaccines and novel platforms that don't collapse when viruses mutate. Let me be absolutely clear. HHS supports safe, effective vaccines for every American who wants them.
So, HHS put out this statement last week explaining the details, stating that in total this affects 22 projects worth nearly $500 million. And that's awesome. It's about time. Now, pull the COVID vaccine from circulation and ban it. Investigate and prosecute Pfizer and Moderna for all the people that were killed and disabled by the shots. That's not going to happen, though. The mainstream media went into full propaganda mode to defend their biggest donor in Big Pharma with all sorts of dishonest and subversive headlines, as if we didn't all watch Omicron do exactly what RFK is describing. One mutation in the entire mRNA platform was rendered useless, worse than useless actually, because it made it worse, unless of course you were selling the platform and then it made you rich. Turns out that this move to cut $500 million of funding isn't even a move to stop all mRNA technology development, though. The Patriot Voice reminds us that BARDA, the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, is working on hundreds of mRNA-based products, and only 22 are ceasing production. Patriot Voice made a long post about it that won't fit all here, but you can just listen to Kennedy's own words to hear this nuance. He mentions in that speech that we just watched developing whole virus vaccines and novel platforms that don't collapse when viruses mutate, which is an awfully nebulous definition of what we do support. And when you start to dig into what we do support, you start to find some pretty sketchy things that I'll be digging into over the next weeks. I'm happy to see this step being made, obviously. It seems like progress on the surface, but we're going to have to watch it closely to see if this is meaningful progress or if it's just more politics. As far as I'm concerned, as long as the COVID vaccine is on the childhood vaccine schedule and given out to infants and toddlers, Bobby has failed at his job, and they can kick rocks. In other news that we have to get through before we talk about what you're all here to talk about, Sarah Stock posted this photo on X last week, and conservative e-girls decided that they were tired of waiting for World War III. Oh my gosh, a young conservative influencer is getting married. She posts what's supposed to be a wholesome engagement post, and women just start coming out of the woodwork to attack her. For Emily Saves America starts commenting on the size of the ring, how cheap it is. I forget all the different e-girls that got in here. Pearl was in, Emily was in, this Morgan Ariel was in. They tried to bring Shu into the mix, and Shu was like, what the hell? I am out of here. So I'll just say, this is all I want to say. All I want to say about the issue is when I judge someone else's life, when you judge anyone's life, you get to choose your baseline. Imagine if you have a friend who you've known for years and years. You've known this person for a decade or more. You've seen them grow up. You've seen them date good and bad people. You've seen them make dumb mistakes and also do great things and have your back sometimes and not other times. You're familiar with their story, their life, and they're your friend, right? Even though they aren't perfect at all. If that person does something dumb or bad or whatever, you're going to have a lot more empathy for their situation. You're going to have a lot more context and be a lot more willing to give them grace. Whereas someone you don't know, you're a lot more quick to judge, right? But the thing is, just because you don't know someone doesn't mean they don't have a story. It doesn't mean that all that context doesn't exist. You're just not aware of it. And personally, I believe in God, and that the godly thing to do is to have grace for other people, to judge them as though they were old friends, not strangers or adversaries. We are all one humanity. We're all a part of God, all God's children, and you don't know other people's lives. You don't know their stories. So in different circumstances, that person might have been your friend, and you might have been on their side. So I can get a little snarky online. I certainly call out evil when I see it. But when it comes to stuff like this, people's lives and personal choices and stuff, I mean, whatever, man. Just be happy for her. Just let it be. But women could not do that. Holy moly. Here's a book suggestion. Go read The Female Brain by Luann Brizendine. She's also got one called The Male Brain. Genuinely super informative books. I have read each of them. I've read The Female Brain like 2 or 3 times, and The Male Brain, I think 1.5. They're all about the sex differences between men and women. The hormonal changes that we all go through, our neurological and biochemical changes that those hormonal shifts cause, and what makes us unique and special and different, what men and women's weaknesses are and what our strengths are. Women should all read The Female Brain because most women don't have a whole lot of self-awareness about why they do these things, why they're like this. I mean, everyone should really read both books because it would give us all a lot more context on each other and maybe, just maybe, a little more grace and understanding for the human experience that we are all having. So, that's all I'm going to say on that. In other news, the Obamas apparently sold their Martha's Vineyard mansion to Leslie Wexner, the Jewish billionaire who bankrolled Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking operation. Except that it's not their house, and the story is getting a little bit sensationalized for clicks and views. The property is called Blue Heron Farm and was owned by Norman and Elena Foster, and it sold to Leslie Wexner for $37 million. A record for the most expensive property sale in the history of Martha's Vineyard. The Obamas used to rent the estate for vacations and such back before it was purchased by the Fosters in 2011. So worth noting, it cost them $50,000 a week of what I presume was taxpayer money to rent it, but it's not Obama's mansion. No. The poor Obamas only have 4 mansions around the country, and although one is in Martha's Vineyard, it is not this one. They still own their own Martha's Vineyard mansion, as well as one in Hawaii, one in D.C., and one in Chicago. So, boo-hoo, poor Michelle, whatever. In the meantime, this graph went viral last week showing just how fucked millennials are, and everyone else, really. If you're watching on your phone, this graph shows the decade across the bottom, so the year across the bottom of the x-axis, and the percentage of 30-year-olds who are both married and homeowners on the vertical axis. Back in 1950, it was over 50% of Americans 30 years old were married and homeowners. Today, it's down somewhere like 5% of 30-year-olds that are married and homeowners. Now, there's no source on the graph, and I don't really care to search it out in this instance because we all know this to be generally true. We all know that this is a tragic indicator of a nation in decline, of an entire culture in decline. And everyone is slowly waking up to not only the problem, but to the myriad causes of it, and we're all starting to slowly talk about what to do about it. But it's too little too late for our generation, for my generation. This is me right here. And it's really sad. Like, I feel very fortunate for the life that I'm getting to live. I'm certainly no victim, and I'm certainly doing fine by myself, but my whole generation is not so fortunate. And everyone that I grew up with, not so fortunate. And looking around at my peer group, my age group, is really sad. And I empathize with all of us. I mean, like, I feel it too. I'm I mean, I'm not married. I'm not a homeowner. I'm doing okay, but So lastly, before we get to all things Israel, I do need to make a correction from last week. I got a part of the Park Avenue shooter story wrong. I fell for the optical illusion on the desk that I said looked like AI, but a couple of people in the comments straightened me out. You may have made the same mistake as me. You may have been straightening me out in the comments. I am far from perfect. I am no genius. And this story clearly shows it. To me, I was seeing this desk as on the right-hand bottom corner here, where you see sort of the line, the edge of the flat part that is where you would put your work. It looks like that is the side edge of that piece of wood. But actually, when you compare the widths of the side pieces of the desk, that's the top of the side piece of the desk, not the side of the top piece of the desk. And it just so happens to line up with the colors and the angles and the lighting and all that it is very confusing. My mistake. I am certainly no prophet. I am not omnipotent, and I get lots of things wrong. My bad. All the other reporting in last week's episode, solid as far as I'm aware, and I stand by my reporting that is a very strange incident, though taking this AI photo allegation out of the mix does mellow me out on it a little bit, and we'll see what happens. But I'm a little more prepared to let it be just a crazy guy that went and shot a bunch of people for no reason, though that's still kind of weird. Who knows? And now, on to Nick Fuentes, and the main story of the week, in my opinion, in probably most people's opinion. What started out as an unforced error by Tucker Carlson has ballooned into what feels like a turning point in right-wing American politics this last week. It started a week prior when Tucker interviewed Candace on his show, and they both attacked Nick Fuentes openly and called him sort of a controlled opposition, bad faith actor who is presumably here to delegitimize sane voices. Nick fired back a week ago, publishing last week's Friday stream all about Tucker Carlson's history and his father's history, and it went super viral. I think that the best way to summarize it is just to watch this Studio Ghibli edit that presumably a fan made of the exchange.
You just interviewed Nick Fuentes.
I did.
Or had a conversation with him. What did you think of that? What do you think of him?
My experience with Nick Fuentes is that he's a terrible person and a terrible human being.
But he is clearly part of a campaign to discredit non-crazy right voices.
I can confirm he's dishonest.
This child, this weird little gay kid in his basement in Chicago, young white men who've been totally cut out of our economy. I mean, they really are the victims, and they're desperate, and no one speaks for them. So they go to Fuentes because he's incredibly articulate, and they think he's our leader. But in one of the saddest ironies of all, he's acting against your interests, actually.
But then when it comes to me, I'm one of the real disaffected white people. You want to talk about me and them? I am them. He says Nick Fuentes is leading all of the disaffected young white men. I am a disaffected young white man. I was a precocious, intelligent, young white college student who went to Boston University, who was pro-Trump and red-pilled by Trump and animated by Trump's message of America first. And I asked questions about Israel, and I was punished for it. I did it years before Tucker Carlson started talking about Israel last year. And I sacrificed, and I was targeted by the ADL, by the SPLC, by the federal government, by the conservative movement that both Candace and Tucker were a part of. He's lonely, he's weird, he lives in a basement. That's a lot of people because of the problems you claim to care about. Do you care about Klarna and people going into debt to order pizzas and home ownership being impossible? Or do you think that's a contemptible, low-status thing to be ridiculed and mocked? What is wrong with being from Chicago? What is wrong with being weird? What is wrong with living in your basement? I'm the inauthentic person. I am that person. I am a spokesman for the disaffected white man because I am one, and you two are not. My dad didn't even graduate college. My mother's father was a garbage man in Chicago, and he committed suicide. He was a veteran of World War II. Who's the CIA cutout? Who's the poser? Who is America? I am America. Chicago is America. That's an American story.
got the frogs on the jacket, the Groiper frogs on the jacket. I mean, it's just like, come on. Like, come on. How, like, you can't, I mean, come on. Like, that's like art. Let's be real. Even if it's like, even if you're the butt of that joke, I would hope that Tucker and Candace can watch that clip and be like, that's kind of art. Like, that's pretty epic. Regardless of the points and everything. And it took the internet by storm like art. It went super viral. Clips from that Friday stream of Nick's went super viral. Edits like that of the stream went super viral. And then the Groipers and everyone that is pro Nick Fuentes started digging into Tucker and exposing all kinds of old clips and stuff like that. So, I mean, love him or hate him, it was powerful. Well, last Friday night, this most recent one, Nick aired part 2 of his Tucker Carlson expose. And once again, he was on fire all night long. I don't even mean ideologically, although I think that too. Like, even if you disagree with him, just looking at the skill of orating, the skill of weaving together a live stream, a show, which is not easy to do. Nick is one of the best to do it in 2025. And this was one of his best ever. And it was all live. There was no script. There was none of this. Like, I mean, obviously he has producers and he had information and like a screen to help him with his facts, but it was all live. And that is super impressive. This week, he didn't actually target Tucker as much as the entire mainstream conservative media apparatus, the neoconservative movement, and the CIA largely. It was highly informative, and you should watch it. If you do, Nick's show is on Rumble, and you have to skip about an hour and 40 minutes in because Nick has like an hour and a half of B-roll pre-stream edit stuff that I don't really understand, but I think I'm just an old man because I don't understand how streaming works. It seems to work fine for him. So just skip way in until you see his green shirt. With highly polarizing figures like Nick Fuentes or Alex Jones or any of these people that get big smear campaigns, you should really go directly to the source. Don't let other people gatekeep for you. Don't let them tell you what to think of him. Go watch for yourself and form your own opinion. And know that it is complicated and there's a lot of backstory. And Nick has said a lot of things in the past, a lot of things in the present, and you know, you got to judge carefully and kindly and cautiously and think for yourself. Now, during the stream, Nick covered a lot of information and wove together a lot of history. Now Pat Buchanan is going super viral. If you know, you know. Groipers are all posting Pat Buchanan hype tracks all over Twitter. But one of the central points that Nick teased out was the difference between being anti-neoconservative, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, versus actually talking about Jewish identity as a part of that issue. Why it matters, in Nick's opinion, to actually discuss the critical Jewish element in the middle of this divide. And honestly, I used to fall more on Tucker's side of this debate than on Nick's. I used to share Tucker's perspective that Nick was rash and toxic and went about talking about these things in ways that were too extreme and too racial and would delegitimize the conversation. And there is an argument to be made that Nick has changed his tune over the last year or two as he has grown up and gotten more skilled and more mature and maybe just changed his strategy a little bit. Nick certainly did used to be more rebellious and flippant and dismissive and just, you know, young. And that's fine. Nick actually talked about that in this live stream. But as the genocide in Gaza has gone on over the last 2 years, and we've seen the Israeli faction's mask come off more and more, it's become more and more obvious how right Nick is in a lot of ways. Not all Jewish people support Israel, but all Jewish people who support Israel support it because they are Jewish. Right? Like, it's an extremely uncomfortable conversation for everyone, especially if you were raised in this like politically correct era in America that I was and that Tucker was and that everyone else was. Like, unless you're really young, right? Like Nick's age and younger. And Nick's not like that young, but like these, you know, 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, these guys have been growing up in a world that is slightly more awake to the wokeness, so to speak. But race matters, right? Like, these things matter. They're real. They're not like, you can't just dismiss them from the conversation as though they weren't a factor in reality, right? Like, would the U.S. government ever hire a Chinese national to work with classified military secrets? No, right? Like, that would be a dumb idea. China is trying to steal our classified military secrets. They always are. So it would be idiotic to hire Chinese nationals into those programs that they are trying to steal information from, right? Like, even if they weren't loyal to China, how would you ever know that for sure, right? You would be worried about the possibility in a way that you wouldn't be worried if you had hired like Norman McAllister or like, you know, right? The same is true for a Russian. The U.S. wouldn't hire a Russian to be our Secretary of State, obviously, right? Well, the existence of the State of Israel, unfortunately, makes Jews fit into this same category of foreign nationals with potential, even probable allegiance to another nation over this one, over America. And this is not some new idea. This was actually raised as an objection by Jews during the earliest talks about Zionism. And it was offered as a reason not to undertake the Zionist project. Because Jews are a stateless people living as guests and immigrants in other nations. And if you build a Jewish state, then that would cast suspicion on all Jewish people around the world as secretly working on behalf of the Jewish state, not their host nation. Right? Nick elaborated in detail on how and why Jews so often became spies during the Cold War because of their Jewish identity and their inherent allegiance to Judaism over their own nation, and how this went both ways. American Jews spying on the Soviet Union, like Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, or Soviet Jews spying for the Americans. But when you introduce the Zionist project into the mix, you start to get Jews spying on behalf of Israel, like Jonathan Pollard or Arnon Milchan. There's a long list of these. Back in the day, they had to be secretive about it. But now, they just do it out in the open. This is how you get Ben Shapiro saying that the single greatest guarantor of his allegiance to America is the existence of Israel, meaning he supports America because and only as long as it is good for Israel. Right? Like, it's so frustrating to talk about because it feels like we live in backwards world, like where literally every day Twitter is filled with Jews advocating Israel first policies and Israel first propaganda and opinions. And they simultaneously say that it is anti-Semitic to say that Jews would ever work together or have greater allegiance to Israel than to their own nation, despite the fact that so many clearly do and aren't shy about saying so openly, like in one breath, Israel, everything, Israel first, Israel defend itself, Israel, and in the very next breath, you're anti-Semitic for saying that a Jewish person would put Israel's interests over their own countries, right? Like, we can all see it. We all have eyes and ears and brains, most of us. And Nick Fuentes just isn't afraid to talk about it. I think that people over the age of 40, like Tucker probably included, don't realize just how many people are listening to Fuentes and waiting for anyone to debate him, like anyone at all. Because it's becoming more and more apparent that the only reason Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro wouldn't want to debate him is because they know that they would lose dramatically. A caller actually lied his way onto Charlie Kirk's show this last week and asked him why he won't debate Nick Fuentes. And Charlie's response was hilarious. Check this out.
Let's go to Nathaniel. Nathaniel, thank you so much for being a member. What's on your mind?
Hi, Charlie. As a TPUSA chapter founder and president, I've seen firsthand how the tide is turning among young conservatives. I say, if you truly believe in open debate in the marketplace of ideas, will you ever be willing to debate Nick Fuentes, or will you wait until his movement forces you to adopt his talking points, as we've seen already?
You know, it's funny. I personally do not give a platform to bad faith actors. And I had a whole open about this. And by the way, a really important thing is not to lie and to not bear false testimony. It's fine. I'll answer your question. You know, you said, I want to have a question about Turning Point events. And you obviously lied about your question. Doesn't surprise me because you have deceit. But you know what? Honestly, I'm asked that question all the time. I don't platform trolls. And I don't platform and I don't discuss people or I don't debate with people that are not good faith actors. And
you debate Maoists and people who champion.
They can keep on yelling at how successful we are and our big events and well over 1,000 employees. But a lot of jealousy out there. We build, they complain. We succeed. We win. They blame the Jews. Thank you. Next question.
A lot of jealousy out there. A lot of jealousy. That's why he won't debate Nick Fuentes, because he's got a big organization, a lot of money, a lot of donors. Hey, Jeej, why don't you go lie down, babe? So yeah, it's all jealousy. Nick Fuentes is just jealous of how many donors Charlie Kirk has, of how big of an organization Charlie Kirk has. I mean, A, Charlie couldn't answer the question, and B, he's like, I see you're dishonest. I see you lied your way into the conversation. I don't answer trolls. Nick reacted to this clip on his show on Friday as well. And it's just so obvious that Charlie has no answer because he can't, because his opinion on Israel is colored by his donors, by an agenda that is not based in facts or America First ideology. And if forced to debate the merits of the U.S.-Israel relationship, that would be made plain and apparent. So instead, Charlie has to go with this hollow avoidance strategy. I don't debate trolls. Well, Charlie, most of your YouTube videos are getting like 40 to 100,000 views, it looks like, from my scroll of your channel. Your channel has like 4 million subscribers on YouTube. Nick Fuentes has just a few 100,000 followers on Rumble. Not even on YouTube, over on Rumble. And in just 24 hours, this Friday's episode was pushing 400,000 views. Last Friday's episode is getting close to 1 million. He's viral everywhere. Everyone is watching him. Everyone is talking about him. And they aren't saying he's a troll. No one thinks he's not a troll. They're saying that he's got good points and that you should debate him. Nick certainly isn't acting like a troll. He's presenting legitimate arguments and cogent opinions. He's offering in good faith to debate you. And you know damn well that if you took that debate, it would be one of the most viral moments on the internet of the entire year, regardless of who won, regardless of what happened. You know that. We all know that. It's blatantly transparent that the mainstream avoidance of Nick Fuentes is a fear response. And so, what's Tucker up to? Well, based on all the evidence that's come out online over the last week, I think it's safe to assume that Tucker probably had some level of involvement with CIA throughout some amount of his career. He himself has kind of said as much, like not that he was ever necessarily a card-carrying member, though he may have been, might still be, actually. I don't know. But we all know that that's not the only way to be involved with the CIA. Like, you don't have to be an official employee to be involved in the CIA. Nick laid out compelling evidence that Tucker is so deeply connected to so many nodes of the CIA thought control networks that it's kind of tomatoes at this point. But it's also important to note that all of those professional connections are in many ways from Tucker's old life. Not entirely, but in many ways. Tucker used to be a talking stooge for the establishment, who was the #1 guy at Fox News. And we all know that Tucker used to be a tool of the state. And Tucker has admitted as much and has expressed shame in his role for doing that. Tucker had a very public falling out with that old way of life, coupled with a bit of a midlife crisis, a come to Jesus, though it was a bit earlier, around his alcohol and drug abuse in the past. So he's changed a lot. How much? The question that's really on everyone's mind, on my mind now certainly, is who is Tucker now? Did Tucker really change, or did he just change studios? Because Nick closed out his stream this Friday with an honest invitation to Tucker to sit down and talk about it with him.
Okay. Well,
Franklin said $88, but they never call you a liar. Happy August 8th to all the writers out there.
Well, and I would really like to sit down with Tucker Carlson and talk about all this. If Tucker talked about Jeffrey Epstein with Daryl Cooper, if he's talking about the neocons and the Jews, why won't he talk to me about this? He called me out. He called me a CIA agent. This is the case that I'm making. This is the case I'm making about the CIA. This is the case I'm making about the neocons. If he'll have on Daryl Cooper to talk about Winston Churchill and Jeffrey Epstein, and he's going to call me out and make accusations against me, this is the show that Tucker and Joe Rogan need to have.
I mean, yeah, honestly, I think this would be an absolute banger of a discussion. If they could just sit down and have a rational conversation about it all, I would pay to watch that. And I think most of America would. Because if Tucker is who he claims to be today, if he really has departed from his old Fox News ways and really is America First in the way that he portrays today, Honestly, I think he would agree with Nick on a lot of these points. And I think he would be very capable of debating his perspective on how you should go about whatever Nick does wrong in other ways. Like if Tucker wants to criticize Nick Fuentes' strategy for engaging with these conversations, I think that would be a really interesting conversation. And it's a conversation that I have in my head all the time of what's the right way to engage with the Israel question and with the Jewish question. Like what's the right way to have these conversations where you're being truthful and you're being honest to the facts and you're not, hiding information to protect people's feelings, but you're also being thoughtful about our shared humanity and about Jewish people that are innocent of these crimes and Jewish people that aren't involved and just sort of the whole thing. It's like there's no right answer. And Tucker and Nick are two of the most experienced people in the world at having these complicated conversations and at understanding the media landscape around it. And so personally, I would be deeply educated by watching Nick and Tucker debate the proper way to discuss these things, let alone debate the actual substance of the arguments beneath that layer too, right? I think that Tucker and Nick would actually agree on a lot more than they're making it out to be, right? And honestly, even like sort of the larger criticism that Nick dropped this last Friday of like Tucker's placement in the Con Inc. media sphere and the neocon money that sort of founded a lot of the modern conservative media that is sort of like alt media today, I still think that Tucker would probably agree with most all of Nick's assessment of what that was. And he would agree, I think, with a lot of Nick's assessment about who had funded it, who had founded it, and what their intentions were. And Tucker was on the inside of it, writing for the Evening Standard and then working at Fox News. And I'd bet that Tucker saw all of the things that Nick was talking about. Like, right? Like, I honestly wonder if Tucker's knee-jerk reaction to Nick isn't just sort of an age thing. Like, I am much younger than Tucker and only a bit older than Nick. And I had the same initial reaction to Nick when I was far less informed. Kind of like, even if he's right, maybe he's going about this in the wrong way. Like, maybe if I talk about him, I'll get canceled or smeared, so maybe I shouldn't. Like, yeah, maybe. In a lot of ways, that's true, but that's their number one working strategy for how to shut someone up. Brand Alex Jones as the Sandy Hook guy, and then everything he says and everyone associated with him from then on is crazy. Then they did the same thing to Nick. But if Nick's right about something, are you going to be a coward and just like hide in the shadows? Because now, more than ever, the world is done with all this guilt by association smear campaigning. Like, we're over it. We've all seen it, and we are seeing through it. Like, Gen Z grew up with that kind of shit. Like, millennials grew up with TV ads. Gen Z grew up with this kind of, like, internet, like, control stuff, right? They don't even see it. They just see through it all. And they kind of just block it out of their brains. Like, this conversation is boiling over and the whole country is having it. And trying to keep Nick Fuentes in a corner is only making him more and more and more popular. And at this rate, I genuinely think he could become a major political contender in the next 20 years if things continue the way they're going. If you ask me, Tucker Carlson probably had some degree of involvement in CIA throughout his career, at least earlier when he was younger. And so I would speculate that there is some defensiveness probably around that part of his online identity. So he probably accidentally made this kind of unforced error of claiming that he didn't know that his dad was CIA until after his dad's death, which was obviously not true. And he's on camera having talked about that before his dad had died. And that's honestly just like Tucker's mistake, right? And I can see lots of versions of reasons of why he would kind of like accidentally do that. And not all of them, in my mind, condemn Tucker, reserving judgment. But now it is totally blowing up in his face. And in my opinion, the right move for him to rehabilitate that image is to grow from it. Just be honest and bring Nick on and have a genuine discussion where the truth is the mission, right? Like, Tucker does that with everyone else. Like, he does that with all other topics, all other controversies, right? I mean, I doubt he'll do that. But that would be the viral move to do right now. Like, that would blow the internet up. That'd be the right move. Personally, I still like Tucker. Even if he was CIA, even if he is CIA to this day, that's fine. because we live in a multipolar media environment right now. Tucker does a lot of great work and does a lot of great interviews, and I listen to them. But I also listen to Nick Fuentes. Just because Tucker accuses Nick of being a dishonest actor doesn't mean that I take Tucker's word as gospel, right? And just because Nick accuses Tucker of being CIA doesn't mean I disregard everything that Tucker says, right? We live in a world now where you can take everything in and think for yourself. And in that sort of a world, in a world where the public thinks for themselves, these old control tactics don't work anymore. You can't shut Nick Fuentes up by telling people not to listen to him. The only way to stop the phenomenon that is Nick Fuentes is to confront him head on in the Academy of Ideas and hash it out. Because there are maybe three things that have brought the left and right together in my entire lifetime: hating the banks after the 2008 financial collapse, the Jeffrey Epstein cover-up, and hating Israel. Support for Israel is fracturing. Every day, this conversation cracks wider and wider open, and ultimately, it's really just the boomers still holding together right-wing support for Israel, or all support for Israel. The youth are well woken up to it. Even at turning point events these days, a huge number of those young people look up to Charlie Kirk in some way, but also listen to Nick Fuentes. A lot of them stand for conservative values in America, but listen to Nick Fuentes. And every single week, there's just story after story after story to make it painfully obvious that the American government is occupied. Israel is scrambling to buy off as many young right-wing influencers as possible and fly them to Israel to give them the propaganda tour treatment and have them kiss the wall and all the rest of it. They have a goal to bring 550 influencer delegations to Israel by the end of the year because they really don't understand how this works anymore. American dignity is not for sale. And any young influencer that takes this paycheck, they only sell themselves and their future out. No one is interested in hearing someone shill paid talking points anymore, and we all see through it. So if you are a young influencer, even if you support Israel, don't do this, because we will all see through you, and you will tarnish your entire future on the internet if you take this money. Because now we have the raw data, right? We can see what's happening. Another poll, this one by the Israel Democracy Institute, found that 67% of all Israelis are not troubled by people in Gaza starving to death. And you can see on the chart how Jewish identity is deeply tied into that perspective, as Jews, for obvious reasons, answered way higher than their Arab counterparts. It's completely inverse. The Arabs are obviously very concerned about the people starving to death in Gaza. And 55.6% of the Jewish people said that they are not at all troubled by it. God's chosen people seem incredibly unbothered by everyone else, particularly non-Jews, starving to death. This week, we also had Bibi Netanyahu come out and just outright on Fox News say that Israel will be reoccupying Gaza and taking the land for themselves. I mean, turning it over to civilian governance. Right. Not even going to get into it. There's so many other things that he lied about in that interview that is just, I'm over it. I'm over interfacing with Israeli doublespeak that are just lies. Like lie after lie after lie after lie. It is exhausting. Also this week, Trump moved to ban DEI on university campuses, except in regard to Jews. You know, like facts don't care about your feelings unless your feelings are Jewish. And Glenn Greenwald, a prominent Jew in the media, called this out. It is so bizarre that many on the right claim that the Trump admin is destroying DEI at universities. They are doing so for every group except the favored one, to serve U.S.'s one sole oppressed minority group, American Jews. Look at what they're forcing Brown to do. For them only. Brown Item A right here. Brown is committed to taking significant, proactive, effective steps to combat anti-Semitism and ensure a campus environment free from harassment and discrimination. These shall include actions to support a thriving Jewish community, research and education about Israel, and a robust program in Judaic studies through outreach to Jewish day school students to provide information about applying to Brown, resources for religiously observant Jewish community members, renewed partnerships with Israeli academics and national Jewish organizations, support for enhanced security at the Brown RISD Hillel, and a convening of alumni, students, and faculty to celebrate 130 years of Jewish life at Brown in the 2025-2026 academic year. Conduct a survey in 2025 to evaluate the campus climate for Brown students, including the climate for students with shared Jewish ancestry, and evaluate social media harassment. The United States and Brown shall jointly choose this external party. So they're going to do a big survey and ask students at the bottom here whether they feel welcome at Brown, whether they feel safe reporting anti-Semitism at Brown, whether they believe Brown has responded appropriately to reports of alleged anti-Semitic conduct. We're going to do all these surveys and studies to make sure that Jewish students at Brown are feeling safe and good and just, which is like, yeah, it would be like, yeah, let's not threaten people. Like, let's all feel safe. Agreed. But in the same document, Brown shall not maintain programs that promote unlawful efforts to achieve race-based outcomes, quotas, diversity targets, or similar efforts. Brown will cease any provisions of benefits or advantages to individuals on the basis of protected characteristics in any school, component, division, department, foundation, association, or element within the entire Brown University system, unless you're Jewish, right? So we're all done with DEI. DEI, no more. No more discrimination and special treatment for protected groups. Now we will be basing everything on merit. Except if you're Jewish, we'll double down on special treatment for Jewish students because we are to believe that somehow Jewish people are the victims of some global evil force. Somehow Jews are disadvantaged and need protection, despite our own eyes quite clearly showing us that Jews are currently the most privileged and protected group on the planet, certainly in America, right? This group that is wildly overrepresented in banking and media and tech, and like, cool, sure, more power to you. Just don't say that you're, a victim. Last week, we talked about how a national coalition of billionaires and politicians mobilized to destroy the life of a girl in Florida that got in an argument with a Jew on campus. This group, who is getting speech laws passed in America to ban everyone from saying anything mean about them, or even anything that's just true but could be construed as inconvenient or critical of them or the state of Israel, right? And last week, Congress called recess and ran off as fast as possible to avoid voting on Massey's bill to unseal the Epstein documents. No time to vote on that. Congress needs to go on vacation and spend time in their districts with their constituents. And so they all flew to Israel to presumably film a gangbang with Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, seriously, this isn't normal. Find me an example of this ever happening before in American history. Since when did our whole government go on field trips together to any of our allies like this? Like even to Canada or Great Britain, right? Like leaving out the bribes and the propaganda and the blackmail that we all know is involved in this visit and this allegiance. This is treason. And everyone in this photo should stand trial. Israel is not our ally, and America didn't vote for you to look out for another nation's interests before our own. This is the elephant in the room. This is the state of American politics today. The JQ is going mainstream because of shit like this. The conversation is here. You can have it or you can hide from it. But while you hide from it, Americans are having it without you. Nick Fuentes is leading the conversation with or without the rest of the American media. The Charlie Kirks and Tucker Carlsons can continue the current strategy of ostracizing Nick Fuentes and pushing him out of the conversation, out of the space, out of the accepted, right? But more and more, the American public is listening to Nick. And with no one willing to take on his points in an open debate, more and more people are seeing Nick as the underdog and as the true voice of America, as the real America first. As for me, I'll continue listening to everyone and thinking for myself. I don't agree with everything Nick says, just like I don't agree with everything that Candace or Tucker says, right? But I continue to admire and respect everyone involved immensely, right? I hope Tucker takes Nick up on his offer to sit down for a conversation. I think that would be one of the most impactful interviews of 2025. I doubt it'll happen, not just for bad reasons. There's lots of reasons. I doubt it'll happen. But I know that America wants to see it. Because ultimately, we're over the gatekeeping. We're over the coddling of the American mind. We all have to think for ourselves every day already. We were raised doing that. Gen Z grew up on the internet. The guardrails are long gone, and it is an outdated reflex to try to hold on to them. We're ready for the real conversation about Israel. And I'm proud of the part that I've played in opening up that conversation to the mainstream, like talking about Epstein and Pizzagate on Rogan and ratioing Elon Musk over Israel, reporting for 2 years now about Israel and all of their dirty tricks. I am super proud to be a part of the conversation. But let's not kid ourselves. Nick has been the one leading the conversation for almost a decade now. Nick really is the conversation. And to try to pretend otherwise feels at best out of touch and far more often like an agenda. An agenda that is slipping away more and more every day. And so I know that Candace and Tucker both have a little bit of personal baggage on the line. They both feel like they've been wronged or attacked or insulted by Nick Fuentes. And I know that Nick Fuentes feels similarly towards each of them. But I would hope that everyone involved can hopefully put some of that personal stuff aside and engage as openly and decently and genuinely as possible, because this is not a conversation about personal baggage. It is not a conversation about he shed, she shed. You know what I mean? This is a conversation about America and about the future of America. And it's a conversation that will either make or break our nation. And if we get through this conversation righteously and honestly and to the truth, that might truly save America from the disastrous course that we're on. And if this conversation is obfuscated or avoided or deflected or taken over by the factions that have controlled it for so long, I'm not sure there's any coming back from the next steps down into technocracy and centralized control. So it really matters. And I really hope that everyone out there that's involved in the conversation, whether you're Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, Nick Fuentes, whether you're these people in the media, in the alt media, the main media, whatever, or if you're just an anon on Twitter, if you're just a random regular person, I hope that we can all put our best foot forwards and engage in this conversation earnestly and openly without bringing our baggage and our hurt and our, personal stuff. Because it really does feel like this is the conversation and this is the time and this is the place and it's happening. And yeah. I hope it goes well. Because if it doesn't, we're fucked.
That would be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet.
Thank you so much for tuning in. That is all for us today. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you do want to support the channel, the best way to do that is go to canceliancarroll.com and buy some merch. That's all for now. Be sure to get some good sleep tonight, drink some water, tell someone you love them, and we will see you next time.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sacred we can't talk about it.
Our security is at stake.